For years, Billie Eilish was the celebrity your daughter loved and you secretly respected. She said the things other artists were too scared to say. She showed up for causes that mattered, and millions of women, young and not so young, believed she meant every word of it. Then came one afternoon at an airport in Los Angeles, one Australian man with a camera, and a phone call that changed everything. Within 48 hours, that man was on a plane back to Sydney. And Billie Eilish was trending for all the wrong reasons, right next to a quote she said on stage not 2 years ago. Nobody is illegal on stolen land. So what actually happened, and how did a concert film, a movie studio, and James Cameron all get pulled into the mess? Honey, sit down, because this one has layers. The man at the center of all this is an Australian content creator, one of those prankster types who builds his following by doing wild things in public and filming the reaction. The kind of content that makes some people laugh and makes other people groan, but either way, it gets clicks. His whole thing was showing up in places he was not supposed to be and making a scene. Now here's the part that keeps getting buried in the headlines. This guy had already made videos that used Billie Eilish specifically. He had pulled her immigration quotes into his content, using her own words as either a joke or a jab, depending on how you look at it. So he was not some stranger she had never heard of. Her team knew who he was. They had been watching him, and that matters a lot for what came next. Because when this man showed up at Los Angeles International Airport and started filming himself joking about moving into Billie Eilish's mansion, her team did not brush it off as a harmless internet stunt. According to reports that started spreading online, Billie's security team flagged the situation as a possible threat. And here is the part that set everything on fire. ICE, Immigration and Customs. Enforcement was reportedly called. Airport security got involved, and this Australian man found himself not walking onto a flight home on his own timeline. He was held. For over 30 hours, he was kept at the airport in Los Angeles, not sitting in a terminal chair waiting for his gate. Held, questioned, kept in place while federal officers decided what to do with him. And when it was finally over, it was not over because anyone decided he was harmless. It was over because they put him on a plane and sent him home to Australia. 30 hours, held, deported. Think about what that actually means. A man crossed an ocean, landed at an American airport, and left without ever setting foot in the country. All because of a joke about a celebrity's home, and the woman whose name is tied to all of that had stood on a stage in front of thousands of fans and told them clearly, nobody is illegal on stolen land. You can understand why that combination hit the way it did. The internet, as it always does, noticed right away. Within hours of the deportation story getting out, social media turned into a courtroom, and I do not say that lightly. Comment sections became walls of evidence. Fans started pulling up every clip, every interview, every speech where Billie had talked about immigration, human rights, and the dignity of people who come to this country. Side by side, they laid it all out right next to the news about the Australian man being held for over 30 hours and then sent home to Sydney. The word hypocrisy started trending with her name. And I want to be fair here, because I think being fair is missing from a lot of the talk on both sides. There are two real arguments going on at once, and both of them deserve a moment before we keep going. Because this is the kind of story that falls apart fast when people only give you one half. On one side, you have the people who feel truly let down, and not in a wild, dramatic way. In the deep, personal way that happens when you have really believed in someone's values and then see something that looks like a direct contradiction. These are fans who shared her quotes, who used her words in their own arguments at the dinner table, in talks with family members who pushed back, in moments where they said, even Billie Eilish gets this. They pointed to her as proof that young celebrities could hold real beliefs and actually live by them. For those fans, this did not just feel like a celebrity making a bad call. It felt like being let down by someone they had stuck their neck out for. That is a specific kind of hurt. And the internet gets very loud when it is feeling that specific thing. On the other side, and I want this point made clearly because it tends to get buried, celebrities deal with real safety threats in ways the public almost never fully sees. We have watched enough Hollywood stories to know that what starts as an internet joke can turn into something much scarier. Real cases, frightening ones, where someone who seemed like a harmless troll ended up at someone's front door. Or worse. The line between funny prankster and real threat is not always clear in the moment, and a security team that waits until they are sure is already too late. If someone had been building videos around you, using your own words as their material, and then showed up at an airport saying they were coming to live in your house, what is the right move? The honest answer is that it is not as simple as just ignore it. Not when you are a woman, not when you are famous, not when we have seen what happens when famous women's safety worries are brushed aside. But here is the part that makes everything more complicated. Once you call federal authorities, what happens next is not fully in your hands anymore. ICE runs on its own rules, its own timeline. The call about how long to hold someone, the call to deport rather than just send someone on their way with a warning, those were not choices that Billie Eilish's team made. Those were choices that federal agents made using their own standards. Does that change the picture? A little. Does it erase it? No, because the first call still happened, and it is that first call, given her very public statements about immigration, that everyone is reacting to. And the thing that really kept the fire going, the detail that kept this story alive past day one, was the length of the hold. 30 hours. People got stuck on that number because it is a long time. If the only goal was to check on a safety concern and get someone on a plane home, 30 hours feels like a lot. And without any official answer to explain it, people filled that gap with their own ideas, which is what people always do. And what they mostly decided was that it went too far. But the gray area does not go viral. That is not being negative, it is just true. What spread was the contrast, and that contrast was brutal in the exact way that only happens when the thing being questioned is something you said yourself, out loud, on purpose, on camera. Because at the exact same time social media was processing the detention story, her quote was showing up everywhere. Not being dug up by critics or people who never liked her. Being shared by her own fans, the people who had saved it, who were proud of it, who had used it in their own lives. Nobody is illegal on stolen land appeared in comment sections right next to headlines about a man from Australia being held and sent home, on posters, in bios, in Twitter threads laid out like a legal case. That image, that pairing, spread into a part of her world she had been very carefully looking after. Now this is where the story moves from celebrity news into full Hollywood drama. And honey, this is genuinely the part that surprised even me. Her concert film, Hit Me Hard and Soft, the tour, was set to open on May 8th at theaters across the country. This is not a small thing. Concert films, when they land well, are huge cultural events. Think about what happened with Taylor Swift's Eras Tour film, which made over $200 million in its opening weekend and became something people talked about for months. Think about what Beyoncé's Renaissance film did for her name. These releases matter. They have long press runs, locked schedules, and ad campaigns that cost a lot of money. And Paramount had been building toward this release for months. So when people inside the industry started talking to entertainment reporters in the days after the airport story broke, what they described was not quite panic. It was something colder, more careful. Press stops that had been set were suddenly being called under review. A big event in Times Square that had been part of the plan quietly disappeared from the schedule without any explanation. Ad placements were being looked at again, and there were more than whispers about cutting the number of theaters where the film would open on its first weekend. That last one is a big deal. Studios do not cut theater counts close to release day unless they have a real reason to think the crowd will not show up. It is a costly way of admitting that something has changed, and something had clearly changed. But here's the detail in the Paramount story that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. Multiple sources inside the entertainment world reported that the studio was quietly advising that Billie Eilish and director James Cameron be kept at separate events in the weeks before the release. Read that again. James Cameron, the man who directed Titanic, one of the biggest films ever made. The man who made Avatar and then made a second Avatar and somehow pulled that off too. One of the most known, most respected, most untouchable names in all of Hollywood. Paramount was reportedly working behind the scenes to keep him away from the mess surrounding his own artist. Think about what that tells you about how seriously the studio was taking this situation. When a studio starts moving around who stands next to whom at a film event because of a news story, that is not a small adjustment. That is a studio trying to protect two big names at the same time. They wanted his good name kept away from any spillover, and that move, however cold and planned it was, tells you exactly how worried the people inside that building had become. The tension behind the scenes, according to those same sources, was real. Billie's team reportedly thought the studio was blowing it out of proportion. Studio heads reportedly felt blindsided. They said they thought the airport story would go away after a day or two. Instead, it grew. And when a story grows instead of fades with a big release on the calendar, everyone in the room starts looking for someone to blame and a plan to follow. Nobody had a good one. And into all of this, enter Finneas. Billie's brother has always been willing to speak his mind about politics. He makes her music, he co-writes her songs, and he is also very much his own person with his own very loud opinions posted openly on social media. He has never kept quiet about what he believes, and in the days after the airport story broke, while all of this noise was building around his sister, Finneas kept posting political content, criticism of the current administration, takes on policy, the kind of posts that in a calmer week would pass through his feed, start a debate in his comments, and then fade. But this was not a calmer week, because every post from the Eilish household was now being read through a completely different filter. Fans who were already looking for signs of a contradiction were watching every move, and Finneas posting about immigration policy while his sister was at the center of an ICE story was the kind of thing no one on a marketing team would have signed off on. Some fans stood up for him. They said he was the one being consistent, that the family was not going to go quiet just because things got hard, and that going quiet would have sent its own message that you do not really believe something if you only say it when it costs you nothing. Others were furious. They were not asking him to drop his beliefs. They were asking him to stop adding fuel to the fire just until May 9th. Just give it 3 weeks, log off, let the film breathe. That push and pull between saying what you believe and protecting the business around you is one of the oldest fights in the entertainment world. It never fully gets solved. You just pick a side and live with what that choice brings. And the Eilish family, for better or worse, picked the side of speaking. Whether that was brave or just made things harder for themselves depends entirely on who you ask. And right now, people are asking very loudly. So here is where things stand. The airport incident happened, the prankster was held and sent home, the quote came back up. Social media took sides, Paramount started quietly moving things around. James Cameron got pulled into a story he almost certainly did not want to be near. Finneas kept posting, and the premiere date kept getting closer. I have been sitting with this for a while now, and I want to tell you honestly what I actually think, not as a final judgment, but as a real conversation, because this story is too big for a quick hot take. Do I believe Billie Eilish woke up one morning and chose to be a hypocrite? No. I think a safety concern came up, and people responded the way security teams respond to things. Fast, without thinking through every possible outcome. That is how those calls get made, not slowly and carefully. In the moment, by people whose job is to protect, not to stop and weigh out the politics of what comes next. But here is what is also true, and this is the part that stays with me. When you spend years building your name on strong, firm statements about how you think the world should work, you are not just sharing your views, you are making a promise. You are telling people who you are. And people hold on to that. They keep it. They bring it back up. They share it as if it speaks for them too, because they feel like you get it. So when something happens that seems to go against that promise, even in a messy situation, even when the full story is not yet out, the gap between the promise and the action is what people respond to, not the messy middle. The gap. That is the cost of speaking up loudly. The praise is louder, yes, but so is the criticism when something goes wrong. Now, will this end her career? Of course not. She has too much real talent and too much deep-rooted fan loyalty for one controversy to tear down what she has built. Careers have made it through truly awful things. They have made it through far worse than a questioned airport call and a bad couple of weeks online. But this moment will stay somewhere. It will get brought up. It will come back around. And the way she chooses to handle it in the weeks ahead will decide which version of this story is the one that sticks. Does she address it directly in her own words and own the messy parts? That could change how the story is told. Does she stay quiet and let her team handle it behind the scenes? That silence will be read a certain way and probably not a kind one. Does she lean harder into political statements and risk turning a bad news cycle into something even bigger? That is a gamble. Or does she just put her head down, let the music do the talking, and trust that the film says everything she needs it to say? There is no clean answer. And honestly, that is exactly what makes this moment so hard to look away from. Because this is not really just a story about an airport and a prankster and a deportation. It is a story about the gap between what we say and what we do when things get hard and the right answer is not obvious. And that gap, that very human, very uncomfortable gap, lives in all of us. We are just not usually well known enough for the whole internet to notice when we fall into it. Nobody is illegal on stolen land is a powerful thing to say, and it is a hard thing to live by. Because living it, really living it, means holding to it even when it costs you something. Even when the person involved has been making videos about you for months. Even when your team is scared. Even when the situation is messy and the right call is not clear. Whether Billie Eilish held to that in this particular moment, I genuinely do not know. I do not think any of us fully know because we do not have all the facts. But the question of whether she held to it is going to follow this story for a long time. And I think that question is worth sitting with, no matter where you land on Billie Eilish. Now, I want to hear from you because your take is the one that matters most in these comments. Do you think this was real dishonesty, or do you think the backlash went way too far over what was a real safety concern? Drop it below. I read every single one. And if you love a good celebrity story told with the full picture, the next video is already on screen waiting for you. You are going to want to see it.